God bless you and welcome. I am really thankful to be able to take this time to share with you. This is a great time um, that people are talking about God, and tomorrow I'm going to be doing a ACF so that we get a little bit more understanding from the greatness of God's Word. But before I begin, I like to bring up a subject matter which is really important, and it's called a default assumption. And most people hear that, but they hardly know what it means. So I'm going to illustrate a default assumption, which is one of the biggest problems when we come to the word and we want it to interpret itself, because we already think we know it, and then we find out we don't, and then we get all upset and we condemn the Bible. It has nothing to do with the word. It has nothing to do with who translated it and what did they believe when they translated it. Before you can translate something, you better know the language really well. And if you don't, then you're going to make tons of errors. For example, we say in English to get the tiger by the tail, but when you read Latin, it's getting the wolf by the ears. What? So you can't use the same thing. In Spanish, we have a lot of similar things. I have people who speak Spanish, and you say, well, someone sneezes and you go, bless you. Well, how do you say that in Spanish? You go, health. You say health. Like, what? We say thank you, and they say gracias. Well, what does the grace of God have to do with my sneezing? So, gracias is, the grace. Like, what? So, there's a lot of confusion because people don't know where the words came from. Like, for instance, the word God bless you, or rather goodbye, is a synecdoche of the phrase God be with you. And we don't say thank you. The original phrase was I thank God for you. And we just condensed it down to thank you or thanks or TY. We just keep shortening and forgetting the meanings that go behind it. Well, translators had the same problem because the text that was received by Erasmus came from the Ephesians text that was located in Byzantium when Byzantium fell, and they ran from there to the Netherlands, and that's where they met Erasmus, and that's where he did the translations. And where we got our King James. So it's important to understand that when you try and translate something from one culture into another, there's problems. So, but you have this default assumption, and depending on your religious background, you will interpret it that way. So let's examine something. So I'm going to give you a little story to help illustrate what's called what? Default assumption. Okay, you ready? There's this man, and this boy and this man and his son are driving along in a truck, and they're going over this railroad track, and the car stalls, which like sucks, but happens, I guess. Well, and they're trying to get the car pushed. Gets out of the car, tries to push it off the railroad tracks, and just as he gets in to get the car going, and the train's coming, and this train hits that pickup and kills the man instantly. So the boy's still alive, so they rush him to the emergency hospital, and while he's in the emergency room, they call the surgeon on duty, and the surgeon comes down and starts to examine the child and says, I can't work on him. That's my son. And you go, what? How can that be? Understand, the man was killed crossing the railroad track, trying to get the car across the railroad track. So how can the surgeon say, I can't work on him? He's my son. Now, if you had to retell the story, how would you give it? You'd give it from your understanding of what was going on. And when someone asked you, well, how can the surgeon say that? And you would say, what solution do you have? Well, I don't care what you think. The question is, what's the real deal behind it? The real deal is his mother's a surgeon. Oops. And here you'd strung out all these examples to support a concept that had nothing to do with what actually happened. Because you defaulted that all surgeons have to be male. And I told you it was the father and his son. All right, so now understand, we have this problem being human beings. It's called a default assumption. But we have to be careful when we do translations, or when we interpret something, or we try and explain to someone else, that we understand the whole scope of this. Because just because you know something, and just because anyone knows something, that doesn't mean you know everything about it. There's little nuances and extraneous circumstances that must be accounted for to get the whole scope and have the full understanding. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at an example. One of the biggest ones that really blows me away is when people read 2 Peter. Now, I know how the translators translated it, because some of those words just don't have an equivalent in English or in Latin, any of the Latin languages. So they defaulted to what they were familiar with. So when we read the Bible, we've got to understand that there is a discrepancy between the subject matter of Noah and the destruction of the original heaven and earth. You understand what I'm talking about? When people talk about the Bible, they say, well, the Bible doesn't begin, Genesis doesn't begin until it talks about something that happened 12,000 years ago. And the earth is a heck of a lot older than that. And the answer is, no kidding. It is. I mean, anyone who has a single ounce of academic knowledge and knows about geology and the actual topography of land over time, erosion, understanding all this, the basics of archaeology and paleontology, you know that the earth is a heck of a lot more than 12,000 years old. So how does that work? Well, they confuse the destruction of the world by water as being the subject matter of Noah. That's not true. Anyway, what I'm going to explain to you, number one, is that there's a default assumption that assumes that the destruction of the earth by water is talking about Noah. No, that's not true. The subject matter of Noah is a region. So let's cover that first, all right? Now, people talk about Noah, how the whole earth was. It doesn't say that. It says cosmos. And a cosmos is like, I talk about the world of politics, and the world of science and scientific research, and the world of being a parent. This is a world. It's all that intertwines within it, but it doesn't mean the whole world. Is that making sense? This is the cosmos. It's everything that's interlinked on that subject. The cosmos of, people go, well, isn't the cosmos dealing with the solar system? It can, but only ours. You're not going to get into Alpha Centauri. That's a different cosmos. Well, a cosmonaut travels from within our cosmos when you're talking about the solar system. When you're talking about another solar system, that's a separate cosmos. Well, we're talking about the whole universe? No, we're talking about a system that's in place. Archaeologically, was there a major regional flooding? And the answer is yes. Did it flood the whole world? No, it flooded a region. The first heaven and earth was destroyed. By what? Water. The whole earth became one big swimming pool, if you want to call it that. There was nothing left. Man was brought forth from that. So when we talk about man coming from monkey, that's like ridiculous. There's so many things that don't work because they're supposed to have dominion in the water. Monkeys can't have dominion in the water. They just sit on the edge. You put a monkey in the water, he drowns. All right, so this idea that monkeys and us, remember I told you about Piltdown Man? That's the problem. Because when they discovered it at the turn of the century, and then they didn't find out it was it was false until 1953. Now, but all the textbooks have been written now. And they still kept teaching it. Then they tried to justify it. Look, when it comes to animals on the land, when you get fed and you gain fat, you don't get fat on the subcutaneous levels of your skin. You get fat on your organs. And the organs I'm talking about is like your liver, your kidney. They get immense fat on them, which is what happens to all animals on the land. But in the water, it's totally different. Because the water, you need to have something to build up to give insulation for your body against the temperature of the water. So this fat builds up, and that's why we have fat subcutaneously underneath the layers of our skin. We have layers of fat. Sometimes they're not proportional. Sometimes they go where they shouldn't. But nonetheless, now a monkey's nose is pointing what? Up. Ours points what? Down. Ours is like a snorkel. Why is that? We have no hair on our butt. We have some, but not that much compared to what's on the top of our head. So we have a really awkward position. We're really streamlined, as if we were trying to go, and we were designed to go in the water. And it's hilarious when you take a baby and you have women. There's so much that, here, why can't a monkey talk? Why can't a monkey talk? You can teach him sign language, but you can't get him to talk. What's with the talking? Talking requires someone to be able to hold their breath. Why would a person need to hold his breath? Well, if you're going into the water, you need to hold your breath. If you can hold your breath, then you can control your breathing and you'll be able to speak. So our whole body is designed to be an aquatic. We are on the path of becoming an aquatic species, or we came out of that temporary, like if a whale all of a sudden started to become a land animal, That's what I'm talking about. So was the earth first destroyed by water? Yes. Everything was taken out. All right. So what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah? It's a regional thing. The whole world didn't go off, just the region. What about what happened with Noah? It was also a regional thing. But what about the destruction of the world by water? That was in the first part. That's why the Bible begins and starts the account in Genesis 12,000 years ago. Is that making sense? All right. It's water, right? Water. Repeat after me. Water. Okay. So let's now go into Genesis. I'll show you what I'm talking about. By the way, I'm here to make you smile and go, ooh, wow, because the Bible is so astounding. All right, here we go. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created, and that is the word bara, which is to bring into existence that which never existed before. The heavens and the earth. And the earth, now there is no word was in the Hebrew. I mean, there isn't. Repeat after me. There's no word was. Okay, got it? I don't care if you go to Genesis all the way to Malachi. No word was. There is become or became, but no was. Now that's weird when you're translating, because you have to assume there's a was. The earth became. Now you'll notice in verse 2, and the earth was, and there it is, and it's not in italics, if you got a King James Bible, by the way. And the earth was, and that's the word, it's solid, it's not in italics. Italics means it was added by the translators, right? Got it. And the earth became. There's no word was. And the earth became, and it's a real word in the text, without form and void. And darkness was, now that word was is in what? Italics. Upon the face of the deep. The deep, can you repeat after me? Deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the what? Waters. What happened to everything that existed before? Can you repeat after me? It was wiped out. What about all the animals and mankind? No, they're gone. You understand? It's zero time. Zero. And God said, let there be light. Is he creating? No. He's speaking those things He is bringing back, he's repairing the damage. He's reassembling, recombining. He's bringing things back into existence selectively, not everything. So this becomes a real challenge when you think, because in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, God brought the whole heavens and earth into existence. And then it became, can you say became? Not was, became. There's no word was. Verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there became light. So God spoke it, and then it became. Not was, it became. So there's a distance between God speaking it and it coming into existence. Got it? Which is the majority of the Bible, like that. So what about everything that was before? Now, I want to show you this. There's a word, tohu bohu, is what this is saying in chapter 1, verse 2, as form and void. And let's go into Isaiah really quick. Isaiah, I think it's 43 off the top of my brain. We'll start with 43. Verse 43, verse 7. Everyone that is called by my name, for I have created him. There it is from Genesis. Same thing. Bara, created him. That's the spirit. I have formed him. That's his body. And last part of verse 7, yea, I have what? Made him. And that's the word asa, which deals with the soul. So this is, it's actually referencing back to, guess what? Genesis. Now let's go to 45. And in verse 18, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens and the earth. Aha, there it is. That goes back to verse 1 of Genesis chapter 1. God himself that formed the earth and made it. He established it. He created it. What? Not in vain. That word there is without form and void. So now we have a problem because he says he didn't create it that way. What happened? If he didn't create it that way, it what? Became that way. All right, so let's go back to Genesis. So we have the first heaven and earth was destroyed. God puts it back together again. Puts it all back together. Not the same way, different. This is called the creation of the second heaven and earth. Right? So in chapter 1, everything God says, he doesn't create it, he brings it, he repairs it, he reassembles it, he recombines it. Everything in chapter 1 is not creation. Creation was done in verse what? 1. It got obliterated in verse 2. So each one of these things you see, verse 5, verse 6, verse 8, verse 9, verse 10. And so each one of these things that God does, he's reassembling it in a different form. But still, it's the same stuff. The only thing that he does is he creates soul life again. Asa, which is like a fire when you light a fire. He lights that again. And he does, a man is one also that joins all those creatures. He ignited life again. Now, the difference between man and animals, he puts his spirit, he created that in Adam. So that's the only other creation between verse 1 and man, he created the spirit. And that's the word bara, bringing something that it never existed before. So what happened? So let's examine what he tells Adam. All right. And in chapter 1, verse 7. So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. That's not referring to the body. That's not referring to the soul. That was already been done. This is spirit. This is chapter 1, verse 27. And God what? Blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful And what? Multiply. He gave him a calculator. No. No. And what? Replenish. And that's exactly what that word means. It means to fill up again. With what? With people. With people. What happened to the people before? They're gone. It doesn't go, the whole world we're living in right now is the second heaven and earth, and there's no relationship to the first heaven and earth. What did the people do? They died. What did they accomplish? We don't know. Nothing lasts 12,000 years. Even our great dams won't survive 12,000 years. No building is going to survive 12,000 years. And the word is, nothing survives. So 12,000 years ago, someone pulled the plug, or I should say someone pulled the plug. I guess so. The whole world was wiped out. What does that got to do with Noah? Nothing. It's separate. The first heaven and earth was destroyed. Then regionally, Noah had a flooding. And then we have the situation with Sodom and Gomorrah, which was destroyed by what? Fire. Again, regional. Then there's going to be a destruction of this world by fire. So we got big water, little fire, big fire. Got it? This is nothing complicated. Really simple. The problem is we all default to what happened with Adam. I mean, what happened to Adam? What happened to Noah is what happened in Genesis 1:1, which is not true. Everything that existed in the first heaven and earth is gone. Gone. It's gone. Where'd it go? It's gone. Well, we got fossils, yeah, but that's not them. Their body parts got replaced by minerals. That's not them. I know I'm a great fossil hunter. The first heaven and earth is really fascinating. But 12,000 years, the Bible doesn't start until 12,000. No kidding. Because that which existed before was wiped out. How long before Adam and Eve? Doesn't say. But it doesn't begin until Adam and Eve, and that begins 12,000 years ago. And you can count the generations by the ages, and it all goes back 12,000 years. What happened before that? That civilization, that world is, can you say, gone? It no longer exists. Whoa. Now let's go into Peter really quick. I want you to understand this is like really crucial to understand, because there's the big destruction in Genesis 1:1, and the earth then became form and void, which God did not make it that way. It became that way. And then we have this one that's going to be destroyed by fire. So we have big water destruction, little regional water destruction, little fire destruction, big fire destruction. It goes big, little, big. Got it? All right. 2 Peter, verse 5. Just talking about that. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 5. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water, and what? In the water. What are we talking about? Water. Where? Everywhere. Not underwear, everywhere. Okay? It's all water. Now, verse 6. Whereby the world then was being overflowed with what? Water. What happened to it? Perished. Any survivors? No. No survivors. Got it? But what about Noah? Noah has nothing to do with this. Noah is a regional situation. It goes big destruction, first heaven and earth wiped out, Genesis begins the second heaven and earth, which we're in right now, and this one is going to be a humdinger. So we have big water destruction, little water regional with Noah, then we have a regional fire destruction, and then a big fire destruction and we bring in the third heaven and earth. Got it? Biblical accuracy, crucial. Don't go into default assumption. All right. Verse 7. But the heavens and earth, which are what? Now. Can you say now? Now. When does now mean? Now. The one we're in right now. What happened to the one before? It was destroyed. Well, at the time of Noah? No. That's a regional one. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. They are both mentioned together because they're both regional. The end for the first heaven and earth happened in Genesis 1:2. But the same word which are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So this world is going to get roasted and toasted. Now, no, not for another 12,000 years. We got another 12,000 to go. Verse 8. But, beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that a day, remember in Genesis it talks about and a day, that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years. Again, restating, one day. Now it's not 1,000, and it's 1,000 and 1,000. That's a 2,000 year. That's one day. So, in verse 10, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with a fervent what? Heat. So the first heaven and earth was gone, wiped out. Not talking about Noah, that's regional. First heaven and earth, wiped out. Regional, wiping out by water. Then we have a regional wiping out by fire. And then finally, the whole shebang gets wiped out by fire. That's what this is talking about. But the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be what? Burned up. So we got big water destruction, first heaven and earth. Beginning of the second heaven and earth, which we're in right now, which has a little water, regional, and then a little fire, regional, and then we're heading into, not now, not tomorrow, not, but 12,000 years from now, a big fire. This is like roasty toasty, okay? You already got that? Whoa! So, what, is that the end? No, it's not the end. Verse 13. Nevertheless, we, according to his what? Promise. Look for a what? New heavens and a what? A new earth. So what are we talking about? What happened to the first one? It's gone. It's gone. Where's the second one? We're in it. This is the second heaven and earth. Wasn't it like the other one? No, it wasn't. It wasn't like anything like it. There were people before. Yes, Adam and Eve were supposed to replenish people, not animals. They already been there. God brought the animals already, but replenishing the earth with people. So it's not going to line up with what evolution is, because this body and a monkey's body are not the same. To say we're the same is like saying a monkey came from a mouse. It's totally different. Or a tapir. All right? Does that make sense? They're close, but they're not the same. So, here we go. Nevertheless, we, according to the promise, look for the new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth what? Righteousness. All right. So, I know the translators, and we have different versions. That's cute. That's impressive. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what does it say? And you got to make sure that all Scripture fits with all the Scripture on the same what? Subject. What happens if you got one or two, and you got 80 that say one thing, but you got two that say just the opposite? Obviously, we got a problem, not with the 80, but with the two. And the two have to be examined. And then you work it, and you find, aha, it fits with the 80. Don't mess with the 80 that conform to two. Too many people do that. All right. So now let's talk about Noah, right? And I get a kick out of this. People are saying, well, it's impossible that it could rain for 40 days and flood a whole region, much less the whole earth. The first heaven and earth had nothing to do with rain. The first heaven and earth was destroyed totally differently. The first heaven and earth was gone, but this one we're in, and which Noah is a part of, that a regional destruction was done. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah, that's why they're mentioned together when they're referenced. When you look at it, it says it rained. What does the word rain mean? It means agua from the sky, water coming from the sky. It fall down, right? Water from the sky, it come down, right? You get wet, water, and it doesn't stop, right? Got it? Water, rain. It's not what happened in the first heaven and earth. It's totally different. This is water, and it says that. Now, I taught you before that there is what's called the heaven and the heavens and the heaven of heavens, right? And I told you that everything up from the surface of the earth to the clouds is called the heaven. And that's true. So when it says the windows or the fountain of heaven was open, it doesn't say heavens, it says heaven. Heaven is between the earth and the clouds, which we call between here and the boundary of the stratosphere, between what was called the troposphere and the stratosphere, that layer there. In fact, I got a neat little picture for you. Do you all see this? You see it? Oh, what is that? Now you'll notice as you look at this, that looks like something sticking out of a rug, right? Looks like some sort of hot little ember on the end of a little thorn or something. That's not true. The picture is taken from an aircraft in the stratosphere as the Challenger burst through the cloud layer of the troposphere. See that? So understanding this whole area is nothing but vapor. All vapor. Now, this is off the Florida coast, and it pretty much stays put. This is the aircraft is like at 40 or 50,000 feet, and it bursts through, and this is the Challenger bursting through the cloud layer and entering in from the troposphere into the stratosphere. That's why this layer is like nonstop. It just stays at that layer. Now, what's fascinating about this is that even though these gradually move, that's not the way a lot of them move. Between the troposphere and stratosphere, there is rivers. And I understand, like, what? Rivers? There's no rivers. Well, all right. So have you ever done that experiment in high school where you take a container and you put it on the fire and you heat it up, and then you seal it and you let it there and wait, and all of a sudden you see the thing go crunch and it all crunches up. You ever seen that? All right. If you were to take a metal can, right, and you just put a couple drops of water and you heat it until the water vapor comes out and until there's no more water vapor coming out, and then you screw the top down and you take it off the heat and let it cool, what happens to the can? It goes, why? Because the atmosphere we're in is 14 pounds per square inch. You ever take a helium, a balloon, right? And you fill it up just a little bit and you let it go. As it rises, it gets what? Bigger. As it goes higher and higher, the atmosphere gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as it expands. If you were to grab it and bring it back down, it gets smaller, 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 and smaller, right? If I were to take it under the water and take it down 33 feet, it would get even smaller. And if I keep going further down and I tied a big old brick to it or an anvil and dropped it, it would get really, 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 really tiny. So we're talking about pressure. So let's look at what happens when I take water at sea level and start raising it up to 40,000 feet. As I continue to move it up into the atmosphere, the gases in the water, which are hydrogen and oxygen, I know that's amazing, but that's what it is, both gases. As you raise it up in the atmosphere, what happens? The water starts to boil. And the more you get into a thinner and thinner atmosphere, the more the water is boiling. Where's the heat coming from? Heat's not coming from anywhere. The pressure is being relieved. As the pressure relieves, then it starts to vaporize. So if I had a big container and I had water in it and I changed the temperature, just sucked all the air out of it, it would instantly turn into vapor. And if I put the pressure back in, it would turn back into what? Water. So depending on what level of pressure. Now, here's where it gets the interesting part. How many of you ever what do you call that with a potato? Peel a potato, right? Got this little thing. I mean, the tool. Don't misunderstand me, okay? Grab the potato, and you got this little tool. And you go like this, and it peels off the what? It slices off the top. And if you had a really long potato, right? A really long potato, and you were to hold it and you push the potato through it, that thing would be a really long cube coming off of it, just coming off. And if you moved it really, really fast, boy, that would just skin that potato and just go flying off in the air, right? All right. Now, there's what's called the Rocky Mountains, right? The Rocky Mountains are just like that tool on the potato. As the water vapor is moving at such high speeds, as much as 800 miles an hour. And the amount of vapor equates to the amount of water that's greater than that which is pouring out of the Mississippi, or damn near close enough to the Amazon River. That's how much water. So what happens if you were to somehow compress the atmosphere to where the stratosphere gets pushed down to the edge of the Rockies, while this water is flowing, vapor is flowing at 800 miles an hour, but like that potato peeler, peels it off and it goes like this, going downward, and it would turn into what? Can you say water? That would instantly be an unlimited amount of, it would just keep pouring in. Well, what's fascinating is in 1861, and it happened in the 17th century too, California turned into a big lake, the whole state. For 41 days, it rained non-stop. The water in some places was as deep as 40 feet. The average was 10 feet. And this is what California looked like. Now, if you're talking about the area in which Noah, if you were to go in the Middle East, it's only a small part, nowhere near this size. So don't tell me you can't. Things like this don't happen. If you want to look it up, it's got people who are in boats going down main streets. Notice Sacramento was what? Underwater. Well, how about San Francisco? 90% of San Francisco was underwater. What happened to Los Angeles? Can you stay waterfront? How about San Diego? Not much different. Now this only happened, no, it went all the way down into Mexico. This was intense. I mean, not camping. I mean, intense as in intense. This is intense. Now, how long did it take to dry up? It took 6 months before the waters receded. And they still hung around. A lot of our lakes that we have came from that original flood. How often does this happen? Oh, about every 110 years. Oh my God, we're due for it. Yeah, that's right. So what causes this? Well, we didn't know about the rivers. We didn't know that these massive rivers that are bigger than the Amazon River is moving at anywhere from 400 to 800 miles an hour between the troposphere and the stratosphere. We had no idea until the satellites. We started sending up satellites and went, oh. Balloons would go wham, and they go flying across. What the heck? So now when you capture that and you bring it down, it turns to water. So we understand that as soon as it clipped that mountains, the Rocky Mountains, it peeled it off like a potato peeler, shoved it down, became rain, and just kept pouring it in. So I told you in Genesis what happened to Noah. Noah was only the window, the fountain of heaven. The fountain of heaven. The word is heaven, not heavens, heaven, singular, between here and the clouds. The windows were open and the fountains poured out. Now that's intense. So how can there be fountains? The deep, the depth, there's no limit to how much water is up there. So when it comes down, the fountains are not something down, it's the fountains from up. Well, a fountain be an underground river. Well, how about an overhead river? Fountain's a fountain either way. We're the people that get squirted at, drenched, all right? Whether it's coming from the top or coming from the down, it's both fountains. If it's an underground river, it fountains up. If it's an atmospheric river, it fountains down. Either way, it's a fountain. Okay, has that got the picture? So when you come to the word, let the Bible interpret what? Itself, and B, don't have a default assumption. Question everything you think. Let the Bible interpret what? Itself. So let's go into 2 Peter. The purpose we have is to stay godly. Have God's characteristics. Be committed to his word. Just like Noah. Just like Abraham. Verse 9. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. For the Lord knoweth how to deliver the what? Godly out of the temptation. Well, is drowning a temptation? Yeah. If you get hassled, God's got to get you out. If it's more than you can handle, God's got to get you out. 1 Corinthians 10:13. There is no temptation taken to you, but such is common to man. So everyone else has had it, or someone else is going through it. But God is what? Faithful, committed. You're going to put his word first, he's going to put you first. Who will not suffer, that's the word allow, you to be what? Tempted above which you are able. But with the temptation, make a way to what? Escape. What's the example? Well, let's look at that word again. Back into 2 Peter, temptation. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of what? Temptation. What was messing with Lot? What was going to happen? He had to get him out. Why? Because he was the only one. What about Noah? God had to take care of Noah too. No one else there. So if you stand fast on God's word, God will provide for you. You see things from God's perspective, you stay centered, and God will prove his word for you. And that's pretty awesome. So now you know the truth. There was a original destruction by water, and then a regional destruction by water, then a regional destruction by fire, and then there's going to be a big one, and then the new heaven and earth. And I look forward to seeing you forever. You are God's what? Best. God bless you.